everybody, it's Larry Larcy. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to compare two age-old sharpening techniques in Photoshop. We're going to compare high-pass sharpening with Unsharp mask and see how the two compare, what kind of results we get using those two back-to-back. There's all kinds of different ways of sharpening now in Photoshop with third-party plugins and things. But those are two of the most popular ways that people have done sharpening in Photoshop, and I wanted to compare them side by side and see how they did. If you haven't already done so, take a second to subscribe to the channel because we got lots of great stuff coming. But if you're ready to get going with the sharpening competition, let's roll the intro. Alright, so these are the two images that we're going to work with for our comparison today. I thought I would try and do one that's more of a cityscape image and one that is a studio portrait, kind of two ends of the spectrum that we can compare and see if the one technique works better than the other in a certain situation. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to apply a high-pass sharpen and an Unsharp mask sharpen to both images, and then we'll look at them side by side and compare which one looks better. So by the end of this video, you'll not only know both of those ways of sharpening, but hopefully have a little insight into the pros and cons of each one. So let's start here with this portrait. I've gone ahead and made a couple of copies of it, and we will start on the portrait. Okay, so we're going to start out with the high pass sharpening, and the first thing we're going to need to do is make a copy of this background layer. We'll do that by hitting Command J or Control J. Then we're going to go up to Filter, Other, High Pass. And it's going to create kind of this odd look depending on what your settings are. Anything from this all the way to down here will just be plain gray. What I'm looking for here is to see where I'm only seeing the things that I want to sharpen. For example, I'm not as interested in sharpening the skin. I really want to work on these eyes. And so I'm going to go to the point that I'm seeing all the areas pretty clearly through here. It's generally going to be somewhere around 3. What I like to do with this method is go ahead and do a little more than I think I need, because I can always go back later and dial it back. So we'll leave it at about 2.7 right now. Again, this is going to vary from image to image, but that'll be a good starting spot for us. We'll hit OK. Then what we have to do is go up here to the blending mode in the layers palette and change that to overlay. And there you go. Now it's sharpened it. We can turn it off and on and see the difference. Now, the cool thing about this method is if you decide you've gone too far, all you have to do is start bringing this opacity down and it will soften that sharpening effect. Just like that. However, if you decide that it's not enough, that you need more sharpening, all you have to do is make more copies of this layer. And another way you can do that is just drag down to the little plus and make another one. And every time we keep copying this, you will see that the effect gets more and more intense because it's just stacking on top of itself. So let's go ahead and remove those so that we just have the one. So that is our high pass sharpen. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one we are going to sharpen with Unsharp mask. First thing we're going to do once again is make a copy here. Command J or Control J. We want to be working on a different layer so that we can dial it back if we go too far. Then we're going to go up to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp mask. This one's a little more straightforward. I generally keep the radius down here about 2.5 or so. And then you start playing with the amount until we've got the right sharpening here that we're looking for. And again, I tend to do more than I think I need because we'll dial it back later. So I'm going to go to this point, which I think is a little excessive, about 135, because I'm starting to see too much here, but I'd rather have too much right now. So that's where we will set it. Hit OK. Then what we're going to do is fade this. And what fading it does, we're going to fade it in normal mode and bring it back in luminosity mode, and that will help with some of the unwanted side effects along the edges and getting color fringe and things. just get kind of a nice, more natural look this way. But you have to do it right after you've applied that effect. You're going to go up to Edit, Fade, Unsharp Mask. We're going to take this slider all the way down and then switch it to luminosity mode. Then in luminosity, we're going to start bringing it back until those eyes look good. I think we're pretty good there, about 75%. Well, let's about 81. That's pretty good. We'll hit OK. Now, again, in this case, if we've gone too far, we can still pull down the opacity using this. If we need more of an effect, we'll have to go back and probably apply another round of the Unsharp mask. But because we generally go too far, that doesn't usually happen in these scenarios. So let's compare the Unsharp mask version to the high pass and the original. Alright, so here are the three versions. Over here is the original, the soft version. Here is the high pass, and here's the Unsharp mask. Now, I feel like the Unsharp mask is a little too much, especially compared to the other ones. I think here, the high pass, we've got an acceptable jump in sharpness, but without getting too much extra side effect to it. I feel like this one's a little too far. So first thing I'm going to do, just to try and even things up, is on this Unsharp mask, I'm just going to bring our opacity down just a little bit. So it's a little more in line with the one next to it. I think that's pretty close, about 80%. So here, I feel like the eyes actually look a little better here on the Unsharp mask, but I think the skin is a little too sharpened for me. Now, again, keep in mind that if you were doing this in a real-life situation, what you would probably do is start doing some masking. Either you would only sharpen these areas you want, then maybe start masking out the other areas, or vice versa, have the regular image and then mask out the eyes so that the sharpened one shows from underneath or something. But you would probably fix this with masking, because you're not going to get the eyes sharpened to a sufficient point without the skin going over sharp in most scenarios. But again, it'd be very easy here to go back to, in this case, for example, on the Unsharp mask, we could add a mask right here and then simply mask out the skin areas. And that would allow us to keep the sharp eyes but not the skin. But again, another tutorial for another day on doing that masking, but just kind of focusing on the eyes right now. I kind of like the eyes better here on the Unsharp mask, but the high pass isn't terrible, and I think the high pass has done a better job of containing the skin. Let's take a look at the hair just for comparison. And I don't see a huge difference. A little bit sharper here. I feel like we've kind of sharpened the Unsharp mask one a little bit more still than the others. So, and that's going to be a variable that's going to be kind of hard to compare among them. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and see what that looks like. So, still pretty close. I don't know that there's a clear winner between these two. I would say that I feel that the high pass right now looks a little bit better than the Unsharp mask, but it's pretty close. Both of them definitely are an improvement from where we started with the softening, and especially if we just masked out the skin, I think we'd be in good shape. So I feel like we're pretty close here on the portrait. I think both have done a pretty good job. Let's jump into that cityscape and compare that one. Okay, so now for this image, we're going to start again with Unsharp mask. So first thing we will do is make a copy of this layer, Command-J, Control-J. Then we're going to go up to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And we're going to try and look at some of these areas specifically where there would be text or areas that we would certainly be able to see sharpening issues. I think that's a pretty good place right there. Zoom in a little bit tighter. And I feel like we can go a little bit more with this. I'm going to raise the radius up here to about 3.5. And we're about 161. I think that is a pretty good. Let's do the before and after. Definitely giving it tons of sharpening. A little more, I think, than what we need. But again, we'll dial back later. So we'll hit OK. I'm going to go back up here to Edit, Fade. And we will bring this down. Switch to Luminosity. And then bring it back up. And I think 90% is pretty good there because we went a little too far. So hit OK. All right, there's our Unsharp mask version. Let's do the high pass. All right, again, we will start by making a copy. And this time we will go up to Filter, Other, High Pass. Again, I feel like we can be a little more aggressive here, but I'm still just kind of looking at those lines. I don't want to go up into that. You're still going to stay somewhere here, probably in the 3s. Let's try 3.3. I think that'll be a pretty good spot, and hit OK. Then we'll switch to overlay mode. There is our before and after. I don't know that we need to play around with the opacity quite yet, but we'll compare these. So let's put the 3 side by side. All right, so here we are zoomed into 200%. I have my original here on the left, Unsharp mask in the middle, high pass on the right. Again, I think this Unsharp is a little too much, so we're going to fade this down just a bit until it's a little more in line with the high pass. I think that's pretty close. So as we start looking at detail here, I think we're still getting some nice lines throughout here. I'm going to bring it down just a touch more. And I feel like still the Unsharp mask is giving us a little bit better lines in the windows than we were getting in the high pass. So out of curiosity, I'm going to take my high pass and I'm going to go ahead and double that. Pull back the opacity a little bit and see if I can get to that point. And pretty much I can. I feel like I've gotten out of these lines by adjusting it up and down. These look pretty similar now. I don't really notice too much difference in the text. I feel like the windows have a very similar level of sharpness. Both are equal to this. And so what's interesting, I think, about this comparison is that you can get very similar results with the two. You just have to kind of dial them up or dial them down and kind of seem to end up at about the same place. I feel like the high pass has a little more detail in some of these areas, but again, that could be because we've doubled that layer and we've pulled back on the opacity of the other. And it's kind of that balancing act. Let's bring this one back, add a little more opacity back to it. You can see we can get those back to where they're pretty close in line. I'm looking at this versus this, and those look pretty similar. So I don't really see that one looks a lot better, honestly. Certainly, there's probably some very minute changes. If we layered them on top of each other, maybe you could change back and forth and see. But you know, in a realistic environment that we would be using where we would do this with our own work, you're not generally going to be comparing it to other styles like that. It's more a matter of did you get a good result or not. And I think both of these are giving a pretty good result. Now, it would be certainly something you could try to compare either one of these to a Topaz or a Luminar, one of those type of third-party software plugins that offer sharpening as well. But I do think that the Unsharp mask and the high pass in both these cases do a pretty good job of bringing that detail back and still being flexible enough, as you saw on some of these, that we can increase it or decrease it once we kind of have applied that effect and once we know how much we really need. And so certainly I would always recommend when you're doing something like this that you apply the effect, save it on a different layer, and then maybe give it a day, come back to it the next day and look at it, turn that layer off and on and see if you've gone too far and if you want to scale it back. Because sometimes when you've looked at that image for a while, you kind of become blind to it in a way, and it really is a great idea to step away for a while and then come back. So that would be my thoughts on this, comparing these two. And like I say, I think they were pretty similar results. I do see a little more noise up here on the Unsharp mask version versus the high pass. So I think if I move these over here where they're up against each other, I think you can see that this area here does have a little bit less noise in the high pass. So with the sharpening being about the same, I guess I'd actually make the high pass the winner because it's got a little bit less of a noise problem associated with it. So I guess that's who we'll go with our winner for today. But as you can see, there's certainly pros and cons to both approaches. Hope you'll give them both a try and let me know how it works out for you. So there you go. Pretty interesting to compare the two side by side. I'd love to know what you do for your sharpening in Photoshop. Do you use a third-party plugin like Topaz or something like that? Or do you use one of these techniques? Leave me a comment. Let's see which is the most popular technique among people. But that's about it for now. Hope to see you soon for another video. Take care. Bye-bye.